So I ran my marathon personal best, 209.48 in the Vaporfly 1. So as you can tell, I'm pretty excited to test the Vaporfly 4. And let's be honest, we're just trying to figure out, are they the fastest shoe on the market right now? And are they worth the money? Alright, so I'm going to go a bit of a warm-up done. I'll do probably about 10-15 minutes of running, and then I'll come back, I'll throw those Nike shoes on, I'll do some drills, I'll do some strides, I'll do some of the activation stuff. The plan for today is 5 times 3K. We're going to run that at sort of just below marathon effort, LT1. That keeps it sort of nice and relaxed, nice and controlled, teaches the body to be really efficient with its sort of fuel economy. It's exactly what these shoes are almost supposed to be designed to do, right around that sort of marathon or just below marathon effort. And then we'll see how they go, and then we'll sort of talk about where it goes next. Can they sort of compete with the world's fastest shoe right now? We'll find out. One of the biggest pieces of advice that I might have when it comes to super shoes, I spent well over £2,000 at this point testing all sorts of different shoes, trying to find that world's fastest shoe. And you have to make sure that you're running to suit the shoe. I think what a lot of people are doing is, buying these super shoes, putting them on, running with your normal technique, and that makes a lot of sense. And then you're trying to figure out, does the shoe sort of help? But like the likes of today, when I'm doing that 5 times 3K, I'm almost learning as the session goes. If I run with like maybe a slightly different technique, not an aggressively different technique, but maybe I put more emphasis into like the landing or the toe off, I feel like I can get more out of the shoe as the sort of reps go on. And what's happening is I'm just learning how to run in that shoe. And these shoes are almost set up to make your technique a bit better, certainly to make you faster. But I think sometimes you have to put a little bit of effort into that and almost force the shoe to sort of work with your stride. And do sort of bear that in mind. Do test little things when you're sort of running in these shoes. Don't just expect it to happen with the way you currently run. But let's jump back into the video. So well over £2,000 at this point. This is another £239 on these shoes. I'm not sponsored, I do all this myself, and how you guys could help me is to like, subscribe, do all those lovely things. I know some of you guys watching aren't currently subscribed, and that would be fantastic if you could. You can also check out 262clo.com. We have well over 400 5-star reviews now. I think you're really going to like some of the products on there. My goal is to not bring ads and sponsorships into these videos. Sometimes I get offered £3,000, $4,000 to do one video, but then they start to tell you what you're supposed to say. Then they start to dictate how the video is supposed to go. And I hope the joy and maybe reliability of my channel is that it's always honest and it's always my content. So let's jump back in the video, but if you could support me, that would be absolutely fantastic. So Nike Vaporfly 4, do I like it? Do I not? To be honest, I thought it was a great shoe. I enjoyed today's session, the 5 times 3K. It's on the same loop that I've been, wearing these other shoes. I didn't have high hopes because what I sort of read is it had got lighter. It was potentially moving in a direction of sort of 5K, 10K. But I try not to read into that too much. And I try to just put the shoe on, get into the reps and sort of let the paces, let the feeling, sort of paint the picture versus what other people have sort of said about it. And I have to say, from a lot of sort of angles, whether it's how it felt, how it looks, what sort of pace did it put out on the loop, I was super impressed. It was consistent in its paces. I think my slowest rep was, sort of 320 per K or 518, 519 per mile. And then my quickest rep was 513 per mile. And that's roughly around sort of like 313 per kilometer. I think I said 513 per mile, around about 313, 314 per kilometer. And it was super, super consistent across the board. It felt nice. I think the fit is really nice. I like that it's that little bit lighter. I don't know if people will love that for the marathon. And that's one of the things with all these sort of shoes. Like, you need to weigh up. Yes, it might be a little bit quicker than perhaps another shoe, but if another shoe gives you a bit more confidence in how it's going to feel in your second hour of the marathon, in your third hour of the marathon, the marathon's a really long way. So these are all things that you have to weigh up. I didn't go into the session with high hopes about the Nike shoe, but then as the sort of session unfolded, I did have this little bit of excitement. I did have this little bit of a, hey, we're getting down to like 514 per mile, 515 per mile. And that's the kind of paces that the Saucony shoe was putting out. And if you watch some of the previous videos, the Saucony shoe ended up being the quickest sort of shoe that I've tested lately. So it's going to be really interesting when I do a comparison video, and I definitely will do a comparison video based on, the sort of paces that it was given today. I genuinely believe it could be a contender for sort of that world's fastest shoe. But I can't know that for sure until I actually wear it alongside the Saucony shoe. And it's likely that some of the reps got that little bit quicker today, probably rep 3, rep 4, because I was sort of learning to work with the shoe, and that's something I've been trying to talk about. Do I think it's going to be, the perfect marathon shoe? I am a bit concerned with, the light weight of it. I am a little bit concerned that it might feel a bit too aggressive for, people that are going to race the marathon and not be running sort of under 2 hours 30, 2 hours 40. It does seem like Nike are going in a direction of this being a sort of 5K, 10K shoe, not so much that sort of half marathon or marathon shoe. You might be okay wearing it for a half marathon, but I would say this shoe is going to kind of suit you, irrelevant to pace. This shoe might suit you. If you think of the Japanese marathon runners, for ages they wore very low profile shoes. They didn't even really switch to the sort of super shoes for a while. And so if you like that sort of old school, low profile shoe, I think it only has a, 6mm drop, I want to say. This went from not being a tech review to now it's a tech review. I think it has a much less sort of, lower stack, not as big a sort of drop from heel to toe. And so if you do like a shoe like that, this shoe might work for you. You might get really excited about this shoe. So, great shoe. It's definitely earned its place amongst the sort of best shoes right now. It definitely deserves to be tried against some of those best shoes right now. But I do have to start almost being sensible with recommendations in terms of, I'm telling you what the paces are. I'm telling you what might be the fastest shoe. But it doesn't mean that it's the shoe that I would recommend that you go out and buy, nor does it mean it's the shoe that I think you should wear for your next marathon. And that's almost something that I need to cover, is what do I believe makes a great marathon shoe? Not a really fast shoe, but what makes a shoe brilliant for the marathon. And I think that's when you start tapping into the stability side of it, not necessarily durability, because people are literally sinking 400 or 500 pounds nowadays on a shoe that they can wear literally once for the marathon. So I'm not as concerned about durability, but I am concerned with stability. And the reason I'm concerned with that stability is because I don't want you to gain 2 to 3 seconds per mile in some of the early sort of miles. If it's 2 to 3 seconds for me, you might be looking at it being 5 or 6 for you, because it will help you more as the pace per mile sort of gets larger. But also I don't want you saving any time if what happens around mile 16, mile 17, mile 18, you lose time because of quad cramps, hamstring cramps, calf cramps. And I've already touched on it a little bit. If you're going to wear these super shoes, which I think you should, you do need to be careful when it comes to, like, am I doing my gym work? Am I doing enough stuff outside of running to make sure I'm supporting the fact that I'm potentially wearing shoes that are making my proprioceptor muscles work in absolute overdrive? I've mentioned that the Saucony shoe is the fastest shoe that I've tested lately, but am I going to recommend people go race a marathon in that shoe? It feels rogue, it feels mental, it feels super springy, super responsive, but it also feels very high risk that there might be a problem later on in the race. You might run into some sort of muscle breakdown problem, back problem, because I would imagine with that sort of performance going up, with that responsiveness going up, stability completely goes to shit. And I'm not trying to shit on the Saucony shoe here. It is a really great shoe, but I'm trying to sort of say you can't have one without the other. So eventually, if you get way too much responsiveness, way too much bounce, you're definitely taken away from somewhere else. And with that in mind, do I think Nike have sort of, nailed this one? Have they sort of found a really nice balance between that responsiveness and then possibly the stability side of it? They could well have done. And that's probably where the Asics shoe sort of fits in there as well, that it has enough responsiveness, enough sort of like feedback off the ground that you're getting faster paces for the sort of same effort, but you're possibly not running into problems when it comes to that stability and it comes to the muscles breaking down later in the race, which, is so important. You're looking at, instead of sort of 5-6 seconds per mile as a gain, you could lose a minute, 90 seconds, or worse, you might have to DNF. And that's always what we're trying to weigh up in some of these sort of situations. So, you know, good session today, 5 times 3K, nothing crazy. I kept that lactate low. That was the whole point. I like to do sessions like that. It might seem repetitive, but it does give us the option to then sort of compare it to the other shoes. But it's not a true test until I actually go out there and do it in the other shoes. Today, I was wearing the mesh, not split shorts, the mesh pocket tights, and that's sort of like a pair of half tights, but it has that lovely mesh pocket. I have my gel here, maybe it'll let you see it, maybe it won't, doesn't really matter. It's the SIS Beta Fuel. You know, it's not sponsored, I'm not sponsored, I buy all these myself. I wanted to try something different than Morten, only just because I'm curious, and because on a quick note, I do send out a newsletter, usually 2 to 3 a week, sort of training tips, that kind of thing. And I sent out a full fuel guide, which was for the day before, the morning of the race, and then how you should actually fuel during the race. And I learned something new when I was doing a bit of research for that. And so what I learned was the Morten gels would take about 20 to 30 minutes to get into the sort of bloodstream and into your muscles. Whereas the SIS, it sort of said even 10 to 15 minutes. And so I wanted to try them purely for that reason, because you're getting them into the muscles a bit quicker. I don't know why. It could be, I think it's if it's an isotonic gel. It's in the guide. So if you go on my website, 262klo.com, and you sign up to the email newsletter, you can get it's all free, 100% free. You know, it is good training tips. That's all I'm going to say about it. But I tried those today. The plan of trying those today was just to test something different. Would I recommend that you buy the SIS isotonic gels? They're delicious. But it's a bit like the Saucony shoe. I'm a bit worried what would happen later in the race. And so the Morten ones are so bland, they're so dull, but I know that they don't really cause me problems later in the race. My concern with the SIS ones is that the sort of sweetness of it, the almost the niceness of it, I'd get to later in the race and I'd be a bit meh. I wouldn't be as sort of keen to, keep doing it. But that was good. So today I did about 80 grams in the 50 minutes. And how I did that was it'll be in the fuel guide also, but every sort of like 10 minutes, or actually it was every 7.5 minutes, I was taking a third of the gel. And that's 13 grams of carbohydrates. And I do that literally every 7.5 minutes. And that's the advantage of, I know I'm blowing smoke up my own sort of brand here, but that's the advantage of the shorts. You're just sort of tucking it back in. You're cracking on for another 7.5 minutes. You're grabbing it. You're taking a bit more back in. It has literally changed how I can fuel these sessions, how I can practice these sessions. But I'm happy with how today went. Honestly, I am. I think these Nike shoes they're gonna cause a bit of a stir, because the dilemma is gonna be, are they a bit too light, or are they a bit too aggressive for the marathon? But I'm excited to see if they go well against the Asics shoe and the Saucony shoe. The next video that I'll definitely do will be the Nike shoe versus the Saucony shoe. But hopefully if I can find in my size some of those other shoes, I will do like a final, maybe 4 or 5 shoes and just see how they all get on. But I hope you like that. Maybe not your typical review, but that was my first impressions on the Vaporfly 4. And like, subscribe, do those lovely things. And if you want to check out 262klo.com, that would be great. Take care. Happy running. Bye bye.